Okay, got your attention there. Welcome. Good evening. I'd like to call to order Community Unit School District 300 Board of Education. This actually we were called to order at 6, so this is calling to order after our first closed session meeting. Mr. Alessio, please call the roll.
Alessio, present. Burley.
Present.
Fiorentino.
Present.
Garcia.
Yep.
Lopez.
Present.
Miller.
Present.
Stevens.
Hey, Mr. Hyde, we are back in the school year, so we have some young pledge leaders to introduce.
Yes, ma'am. Madam President, board members, staff, family members, stakeholders, my pleasure this evening to ask Mr. Chris Columbaro to come up to the podium and introduce his students. This evening's pledge, and this is our first school participation event of this new school year. He has students here representing Algonquin Lakes Elementary School, and so Mr. Columbaro.
Good evening.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt because I'm going to tell parents, please feel free to come anywhere, including up here, wherever, to get pictures. Just don't block another parent.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. I told them as soon as I started yapping, they could come on up and start taking
Wherever
pictures.
you want.
So good evening, Superintendent Hyde, members of the board. Very, very pleased to be here this evening as this group of students truly represents a nice analogy. As we wave goodbye to summer and cheer on our school year, the students that are here before you and their families that are represented participated in our summer intervention program this past summer. While we don't have everyone here tonight, again, these students utilized the summer to gear up for a great year ahead. They kept learning alive in the building throughout the year, throughout the summer, and they transitioned off a great year of their respective grade levels, looking to these opportunities ahead. We know children lose skills over the summer vacation, and while we do our best to provide summer packets and summer reading calendars, nothing quite beats that best practice and instruction that they can get from teachers. And so we're very proud to offer this program for 2 consecutive years at Algonquin Lakes. My staff focused on these very things, using research-based programs, instructional strategies. They challenged these students and promoted their academic growth. They were able to hone their reading and math skills. They made every moment count in this opportunity. Now, it was summer, so we had to have a little fun, right? No work, or a little work, a little play. So these students were engaged in top secret missions with Mrs. Bellick. Mrs. Tregler had ice cream writing socials. And Mrs. Sarkovsky took a virtual field trip to a humble chicken farmer's backyard who will remain nameless. In all seriousness, I truly want to thank the students and the families who kept our summer intervention program strong. And again, wish them the very best on the school year, to the board as well, too. Our participants this evening, I'm joined by Alexa Baxter, Sophia Carey, Abigail Sue, Gabriella Leonard, Casper Leonard, Eddie Shannon, Sophie Shannon, and Shyla Tallman. Would you please stand and join them for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So why don't you guys stay there? We're going to come this way, and we'll shake your hands. Yeah, I like that idea. Ice cream writing socials. Yeah. Okay, can we be done now? Moving on. Approval of the agenda, I have no changes. Did anyone else have changes? Okay. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second, Mr. Alessio?
Fiorentino.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Stevens. Garcia.
Aye.
Lopez.
Aye.
Burley. Alessio, aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, moving on. Superintendent report. Mr. Hyde.
Good evening, Madam President, board members, staff, family members, and other stakeholders. This evening's superintendent's report, we will have a total of 4 topics for you, 2 of which have been under discussion and brought before the board previously. The board at that time provided direction for additional follow-through and through the form of stakeholder town hall meetings. We've concluded that information and we'll do a presentation for you this evening. I'll ask Dr. Churchill to join us at the podium to help address some of these various topics. The 4 topics for discussion this evening are anchor texts for our English language arts classrooms. Again, this next topic is the first that we are bringing back to the board following your feedback to us previously. A transition away from a valedictorian system to embrace a cum laude system recognition for the class of beginning of 2019. Reviewing the recommendations for our graduation requirements. That was a direction provided by the board. It had been some time based on your feedback previously since we've reviewed these. We do have some updates and recommendations for revisions for the board. And then finally, and everyone can respectively scratch their heads throughout the discussion, we will have a brief discussion about changes to our head lice policies and screenings in our schools. And it's one of those things that every time I bring up this topic, everyone starts to fidget and then scratch. So we understand. Topic number 1, again, Dr. Churchill, if you'll join us at the podium to address any other questions, along with Dr. Doran, and we also have Joe Schumacher, respectively, our elementary curriculum and assessment executive director, and Dr. Schumacher, who is our secondary executive director of curriculum and assessment. So, gentlemen.
Sure. Board, I'd like to just thank you for the opportunity to briefly share with you some information about novels and anchor texts in District 300. The staff and administration have been working extensively to develop English language arts for curriculum frameworks. And with these frameworks, and in all of the frameworks, are anchor texts. And an anchor text is used to explicitly teach standards, and all of the curricular frameworks are aligned to the new Illinois Learning Standards. And so we wanted to share with you a little information about this evening. It's our ultimate goal to come back to you annually, or if you request even more frequently, as we solidify and anchor, no pun intended, the novels and such that we'll be using with the English language arts frameworks.
So with the recent curricular changes, starting with the high schools a few years back, and then more recent work with the elementary and the middle levels, we have had a historic protected novel list, and that list has been a reference point for teachers in terms of mostly your literature language arts teachers, making sure that that a student's not reading the same book in let's say 6th grade as they would in 8th grade. With these curricular changes and changes in novel titles specifically, that list will need to be updated. So we are working towards that. What you have in your board packet is a list of current required text broken down by grade level that all students will have exposure to and access to. That list that you have does not cover all of the titles that are listed on curriculum frameworks. Those are the ones that, again, all students will read and access. There's also a list of extended text options, some choice. So in some cases, there might be a bank of titles that a teacher can choose from. And again, focusing on those same standards, but some flexibility and choice in terms of what novel or a group of novels is used. So you have that information in your board packet.
What would it be if we didn't actually give you a specific example? So this is a anchor text for kindergarten called On the Town. And it's used within the kindergarten English language arts curriculum framework. And in all of the anchor texts at the elementary level, and I wish I could take credit for this, but Kristen Corvo and Jackie Dajinski actually put labels in every anchor text which clearly are aligned to the explicit standards that should be taught with this text. Now, this particular one on the town is about Charlie, and he has a homework assignment, and he is to explore the town with his mom and learn as much as he can about the community. So here's just a couple examples of the explicit standards that we would hope for the teacher and the students to engage in. Relative to social studies, that the students would be able to describe roles and responsibilities of people in authority, that they would explain how all people, not just official leaders, play an important role in the community. But in addition to social studies, this is an informational text for students, which means it's not highly related to fiction. And so it says, with prompting and support, ask and answer questions about key details in text. And I'll just cover one more. Identify the front cover, back cover, and the title and the page of the book. And while these may seem simple to us, when you think of the rigor of this with a kindergarten student, and that it scaffolds as we move up through the system to really address the standards, and then the anchor text is used in a variety of capacities throughout the day and throughout the unit to guide our students to become more proficient in their skills.
So for the benefit of the board, it's also important to note that these are all approved texts. They're in alignment with not only the grade level standards and expectations, but that we also vary the genre, we vary the reading levels, the Lexile levels, so that we can challenge students. Plus, we can also work on pre-reading skills as needed. In addition to which, there are substitutes for many of these texts. So should someone find that they have a religious or political objection to the content within one of the protected texts, we do provide other options. But again, these are books that are approved through the ALA and Young Adult Literacy Association, so that we are not willy-nilly purchasing books or aligning texts based on personal opinion. It's based on all of the research as it relates to cognitive development of our students. I would commend the group on this job, because one of the number one concerns whenever you transition to a new curriculum framework, as we have in elementary in particular most recently, is the availability of resources for teachers to be able to use and integrate in their classrooms. So tremendous credit goes to the staff for their hard work in this regard.
Mr. Stevens.
Dr. Dorn, this is a loaded question and not meant to be overly controversial, but when I'm reading this, it said we have common frameworks in place aligned to the new Illinois learning standards. I heard address the standards at least 6 times between you gentlemen. If we didn't have any of those Common Core Illinois learning standards, would this be a book, or is this series of books that our teachers would actually pick? Or are we picking because we're forced into the standards?
Sure. No, these texts were actually picked by teachers when they were writing the framework. That we like to think that we've always been teaching standards to kids of what that's rigorous, but this isn't explicitly picked because of the Common Core standards or the Illinois Learning Standards. This is picked because it's really good informational text, or in other cases, literature text, and it just happens to be used in a way that allows us to further develop the students specific to the Illinois Learning
So
Standards.
why so much emphasis then on addressing the standards? Mm-hmm. I heard that at least a half a dozen times.
So I believe the best response to that is that's how we'll be evaluated. So at the end of the day, when we administer a statewide assessment, whether it was ISAT or PARC, there is an expectation from the state and from the community that we will be evaluated based on our effectiveness of delivering grade level standards, expectations for grade level proficiency. And that's why there's an emphasis on standards. Even outside of Common Core, every state has adopted standards and benchmarks that must be taught that are grade level appropriate. So this does, and I think that's why we emphasize this, is that we are picking content, we are picking resources and aligning the curriculum framework to ensure we're teaching what should be taught. Because there are and have been instances in our history and in other districts where frequently we teach what we want to teach. And again, with students being assessed and being held to a high standard, and we are compared, And as you know, schools will be evaluated and compared to other schools in other districts, and that's one of the benchmarks that our community holds us accountable for. I think that's the justification and part of the answer you're looking for.
Yeah, if I could just add one thing to that too, is this is an example too of how the social studies standards and the English language arts standards intersect. And there's a lot that can be developed in developing the literacy skills of kids through teaching science and using that as informational text, through poetry, in this case, information related to social studies, and there's an intersection, with the novels as well.
Can I also add one thing? There's also, looking at the current list of anchor texts, there's it's kind of like what comes first, the standards or the novel or the standards. And to be honest, we do have some contemporary texts that were chosen because we thought as a teaching team and as an administrative team that this new text would best serve the curriculum and the standards. However, we also have timeless novels, from the literary canon, such as The Great Gatsby, that have been in our curriculum, that have been in our district warehouse and in use in high schools, for instance, several years before the Common Core standards were invented. So it's about taking that Great Gatsby then, and how do we take a timeless piece of literature that has universal themes and is rich in the literature world, and applying that specifically to skills-based and standards-driven curriculum and assessment.
Mrs.
So
Garcia.
that we're not just teaching Gatsby for the sake of teaching Gatsby.
Kim?
I understand that the audience isn't privy to the anchor list that we got in our board packet, and this might be an unfair question. So I'm looking at it because that's what I do, and I'm seeing lots of books at certain levels, one book at the 12th grade level, two books at the 11th grade level. I have an 11th grader, I have a 9th grader, so that's where my eyes went. And so is there they're going to be reading more than just one book, right?
Yes.
So that's what I said. I don't think it's a fair question.
So to explain that is you'll see more choice extended text options in the current high school frameworks where, for instance, let's just take the 12th grade. 1984 is listed, but there's also Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451. They say, I say, there's multiple text that a teacher or a PLC team at Jacobs or Dundee Crown or Hampshire can pull from. But these are district approved titles. That's why when I say we update the protected list, those additional titles that are options need to also be included, because we still don't want a 10th grade teacher using that bank of texts.
Thank
Mrs.
you.
Burley?
So when you're talking about an anchor list, these are required reading.
Correct.
Okay. So that 12th grader will read 1984, but will have options to read others.
Correct.
The 10th grader will have 6 books that he has to read, and then he will I don't think he's going to have a whole lot of time for other options, but okay. I just wanted to make sure that the anchor that kind of meant that
No.
No. So Dr. Churchill can maybe help me, but depending on the level, so 200, 300, 400, there's some variance in terms of titles as well.
Okay.
And that's the point where we talked about not only the very genre, but also the lexile level, the appropriateness of the reading level, and so that we can ensure that not only are we challenging students at their current level, but promoting advancement of their literacy skills moving forward.
Mrs. Garcia.
Just one other follow-up. You're working on a new list. So what we've received here is this old list. Dr. Churchill's shaking his head, so that's why I'm pausing. I'm sorry, Dr. Schumacher.
No, that's okay. The protected novel list is not what's included in the board packet. The protected novel list that's outdated is actually a PDF document that,
Okay.
to be quite honest, we can't even manipulate. It's been that old. So what we've done is we've presented tonight a list of the required text across the board, and in addition to that, when we update our protected novel list, we'll have to include additional titles that are extended text options, the optional bank of text.
How often does that happen? I mean, I see the Book Thief on here. I know that it's kind of old, but it had a resurgence of popularity. Is this something that's reviewed biannually, annually? How much are we on the forefront bringing the new stuff in? Because I'm all about The Great Gatsby and Of Mice and Men, but there is fantastic stuff, especially at the elementary level, that's coming out.
So we've done, again, some pretty major curriculum overhaul across all 3 levels recently. The next steps will be to develop a process across not just in English language arts, but across our content areas for curriculum revision and refinement that would include novels and textbooks as well, instructional materials in general.
So my closing comment is, this is great. I don't remember how many people would still be here from previously, but I'm going to use the example of Where the Red Fern Grows. That was read in 4th grade, 6th grade, and 10th grade. So there was a little bit of a lack of coordination, and we had some issues. I'm not going to call them protected novels, but we had some ownership for each of those grade levels wanting that book to be read. So it was possible for a student to have to read that book 3 times. I don't see that that's going to be an issue anymore. One of the comments that I would also like to make is there's going to be times when the students are going to read ahead or read other books. So where I use the example Where the Red Fern Grows, one could have a student, and mainly those students that might be in Battle of the Books, because Battle of the Books typically has a group of books that transcend just that 5th grade curriculum and reading level. So by the time they get into 6th grade, they may have already read Hatchet, because I think at one time Hatchet was on the Battle of the Books list. I don't think we're trying to limit students, and I don't think we're trying to, where I use my example of Red Fern Grows, that's because that was a curriculum issue. If you're going to have students that are out there reading, they may end up having that issue, but it won't be because we, set them up for that. And it sounds like on the list of books, there'll be options.
Correct. Options, and it will also continue to obviously have a pretty rich leveled book room in each of our schools, with again, text titles that are above and beyond that are listed on the curriculum frameworks, which lend a differentiation.
If you have any further questions, contact Dr. Schumacher.
You know where to find me.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
Thank you.
Moving on to topic number 2, Dr. Churchill.
Good evening. So we are bringing back to the board some recommendations that affect the high school level. The first set of recommendations has to do with cum laude recognition for students. And just as a frame of reference, the class of 2019 are our current freshmen. So the students that just started as high school students are the class of 2019. So for this topic, what we're discussing would go into effect for our current freshmen. So if you recall, in November of 14, this board asked that, prior to that, asked that we look at graduation requirements and asked that we look at other issues related to the high school. On November 10th and 14, we made a recommendation that class rank be eliminated, and that we eliminate valedictorian and salutatorian recognition and replace that with cum laude recognition. So the board directed us to spend some more time polling the community and staff and getting some feedback. We did survey informally administration and staff and students throughout the school year. And then in the summertime, we had 2 town hall meetings at the high school level at Dundee Crown and at Hampshire High School, where we got community feedback. So we didn't hear anything from our conversations that would lead us to change our mind about making the recommendation. So we're back to formally ask you for approval at the September 8th board meeting. So the first recommendation is eliminating class rank. Many of you have seen these slides before because we use them at the town hall meetings in the summertime, so I won't go over them in depth. But one reason for eliminating class rank is to reduce the level of competition and encourage more collaboration. The second reason really is that we've seen many colleges and universities no longer put as much of an emphasis on class rank. A number of districts regionally have eliminated class rank, so that list is in your packet. We looked at some research done by the National Association for College Admission Counseling. It's a few years old, but they showed over the course of 20 years how test scores and grades continue to play a key role in college admittance, but that class rank has decreased in importance over the same period of time. The National Association of Secondary School Principals, also another professional organization, recommends eliminating class rank for some of the same reasons that I stated before. So that's the basis for that recommendation. Oops, did I skip one here? Okay, sorry. There we go. So the second recommendation then is to establish cum laude, magna cum laude, and summa cum laude recognition for students. We indicated here that perhaps a 3.5 to a 3.69 GPA on the unweighted scale would be equivalent to cum laude recognition, and then magna cum laude and summa cum laude for higher GPA factors. We also discussed at the town hall meetings what some additional factors may be, and so we'd like to have a little bit further conversation, and when we come back to you next board meeting and ask for a formal approval, we can talk about that in more detail. There was some discussion or conversation about community service or participation in clubs or attendance or no discipline violations. So some of those things to be included in the calculation of the recognition. So we could either go with a straight GPA value or we could add something additionally as well. So next steps, we'll come back to you in September and ask for formal approval. Oops, sorry, before I go there. Can I answer any questions?
Mr. Fiorentino?
Dr. Churchill, would you go back one slide? I guess I can't remember the numbers. Yes. So those definitions of cum laude, magna cum laude, summa cum laude, have you put our system grades into that yet to see where that shapes on a curve or on a graph?
That's an excellent question. I haven't done that, so that would be an excellent activity.
I would like to see that.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Mrs. Burley?
I like the idea, obviously. I think it's good because then student basically isn't in competition with other students. He's just in competition with himself. The only thing that I'm afraid of, and I like the plus other factors, because not everyone can achieve to that level, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be recognized. And the only thing that I'm afraid of with some of this, and probably maybe not, but is that will it discourage students from taking the harder classes? Because if you take, you're getting those B's in those AP classes as opposed to, well, if you just drop down, you'd get the A's and you'd graduate magna cum laude or something.
Sure. So while I can't definitively answer that question, right, you have to ask yourself, why do our students take challenging classes? Some of them take it for the love of the challenge. Some of them take it for the love of the content. Some of them take it because they know they want to go to Harvard. And having an unweighted GPA of 4.0, but not taking any rigorous classes, won't get you into Harvard. So I don't mean to be flippant, don't get me wrong.
Scholarships.
You won't get you scholarships. So I'd be willing to imagine that students will continue to take a challenging, rigorous course load. Their parents and families have expectations of them. I don't imagine it's going to change significantly for our high-end students, at least.
Given the limited number of students who are currently recognized formally, and the fact that last year, for example, we had a total of 21,333 AP course offerings, and yet only 68% of the students who took those classes actually sat for the test. Speaks to the fact that in some instances, and we've addressed this through the weighted grading and the GPA, that some students were feeling pressured into going into coursework, whereas they did not take the AP assessment, which meant they were not working to get that 3 or higher, which would count towards college credit. To us, that's a clear indicator in many instances that students were using this to basically work towards a GPA calculation. We do not feel, quite honestly, that this would have any negative impact whatsoever on the number of students participating in advanced coursework, simply because this is a far more fair and consistent manner for us to recognize multiple students. So to Mr. Fiorentino's point, we can go back and provide the board with numbers as to where students would fall. And again, this provides a greater opportunity to recognize students. Schools will continue, as they currently do, to recognize students for a variety of things. As you know, during most of our graduation ceremonies, we provide the PowerPoint, and in the program, we make sure that we provide students with accolades for their ACT score, for other things that they participate in. So I don't think that we would miss students. The other factors on here arguably would be those that we feel would either exclude a student because of a level 4 disciplinary action, things of that nature. I mean, there are things that we need to talk through and bring before the board as to what those practices might be. But I think that this is an opportunity for us to embrace a larger number of students who work very, very hard and aren't penalized for maybe not being inclined to go down an AP or dual enrollment path. That our students who are pursuing other options, whether it's the fine arts or it's a career and technical education pathway, have the same opportunity to be recognized for their academic performance as their peers.
Okay, I think, Mr. Alessio?
Yeah, also a question I might not be understanding exactly, but why would the students even care what designation they have? I mean, it'll be an asterisk in the graduation program where parents will be proud, but it'll be too late to go on a college application or anything like that. So do you think students would even care what rating they end up with?
I think they'll care. Yeah.
I think it will also matter to the students that are not the high achievers, that they now have the ability to be recognized at graduation. So they may not have been in the top 5% of their class and not getting that recognition, but have a 3.5 GPA. This gives them the ability to be able to have recognition for whatever level that student is capable of learning. It's, you know, and again, on the this is based on the unweighted, so it's sort of levels of field. Students that are taking the higher level classes, from what I understand in previous presentations, colleges are going to do their own weighting of the grades. They're going to take the classes, they're going to look at the grades, and they'll calculate. So you might have that 4.0 and still be taking those higher level challenging classes. Your college of choice, hopefully your choice, will recalculate that GPA or whatever criteria they're using for enrollment processes.
That's correct.
Kim?
I would just want to throw out there, because we're going to keep talking about this, I know. The other factors scares me a little bit, because I think it dilutes the award. I like the idea that we're going to be able to give kids who maybe are welders or shop kids who are getting the A's and they're still in there and they're bringing their GPA up in those ways, a fighting chance at recognition at graduation. But I think we need to be very, very cautious about diluting what those awards really mean by adding in attendance.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, I just hope that we'll keep that in our minds as we move forward with this, because
And since we're not looking at valedictorian and salutatorian, where we'd end up with, how many did we have? 25? Yeah. Something like that, because of going with this, which opened up the ability for someone who was in welding or was in a different class to be a 4.0, but it takes away the issue of having those 25 students that are out there on the track at graduation. Mrs. Kopes. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So I guess the one thing that I would add is that we're talking about the current freshmen, right? So no grades have been posted yet. No, nothing's on their transcript. We have a little bit more time to finalize that portion of it. The reason that we're asking the board to approve the general concept of eliminating class rank and going to cum laude system now is so that before anybody gets a grade on a transcript, they can all be well aware of what they're working towards 3.5 years down the line. And then, I would argue that as long as we get those other factors finalized and solidified and clearly into a handbook in the next month or so, I think that it would give everybody a crystal clear idea of what they'd be working towards by the end of their freshman year, senior year.
Mrs. Kopaz.
I think it's a great idea. I especially like it because it will give students the opportunity to take a wide variety of classes and not try to just take those classes that were weighted heavily, and would give them that position in the class rank. So I applaud the idea. I think it's wonderful.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So a third topic this evening is a review. And just wait for the head lice.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the review that we've done regarding graduation requirements, and we are going to make some recommendations for modification to our current graduation requirements. So the background here is that 2003 was the last time the board formally modified graduation requirements. I wasn't here in district at the time. My understanding was prior to that, so those of you who are here remember that each of our high schools had different graduation requirements.
Yeah.
There was a day where we had different expectations for our students. So by 2003, we should all be proud to say that we addressed that. And personally speaking, I feel very good about the education we're providing to our students. However, since it's been over a decade, it's appropriate certainly to review that. So the board asked administration to take a look at grad requirements. Again, we did some informal conversation with students and staff and parents over the course of the school year. In May, we surveyed staff. We also surveyed the community members via something we sent out on the website, and we had the same 2 town hall meetings where we discussed graduation requirements. So we're going to make some recommendations to go into effect for the class of 2020, which are our current 8th graders. So no student currently in high school would be impacted by the recommendations that we're making tonight. And again, we'll be asking you for formal approval of these next board meeting. So here's a summary of the current grad requirements. 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 years of science, 3 years of social studies, specifically including world history, U.S. history as year-long courses, and then global econ and U.S. government as semester-long courses. We require a total of 4 credits of PE and health when combined together, so 1 for each semester that a student is in attendance if they are in attendance for 4 years. We require driver education as a graduation requirement. The state doesn't require it, they just require that we offer it. And we have students who take driver ed privately who get the little check mark on the transcript, but they don't actually get credit for it. And then we have the students who take driver ed in our buildings, and they get credit and the little check mark on the transcript. And then finally, we have elective credits. A total of 3 elective credits need to come from one of 3 strands, Strand 1, Strand 2, and Strand 3, and I'll describe those in a little bit more detail in a moment. This is another way to look at the graduation requirements. This is from the course guide, and it kind of breaks down the years, what grade level students are when they take the various courses. And then the strand requirements. So strand 1, art, world languages, and music. Strand 2 are the core areas, so English, math, science, and social studies. And strand 3, which fall under the CTE area, which are business, family, consumer sciences, and industrial education. In the attempt to provide a well-rounded education to all students, a comprehensive education, we've required for more than 10 years now that students take at least 1 credit in each of these 3 areas. You've seen this before. It's a comparison to a couple of local districts. It's really hard to see here. What's most important to note is if you look at just the academic credits on the very bottom row, you'll see that we compare favorably to the requirements for area school districts in terms of the total numbers of credits that are required for graduation. We require as many, if not more, academic and elective credits than area school districts. It's impossible to pull everybody. Yes, sir.
On this chart, you've got global economics under social studies.
Mm-hmm.
On the board packet, it's got global economics under, I lost it,
Consumer.
consumer education.
Correct.
Which is it?
When I get to my recommendations, I'll be explicit about that. We meet the state's consumer education requirement via the global econ course, which falls under the social studies department.
Correct.
We'll be making a recommendation to meet the state's consumer education requirement in one of 4 courses, 2 of which are offered in social studies, 2 of which are offered in the business department.
I was just wondering if we were putting enough emphasis on that section, because that really is what they're going to be facing in the real world.
Consumer ed,
Yes.
absolutely. And so the argument when
It's
I
only half a credit.
Oh, I understand. So it's a semester-long class, not a year-long class. I understand your suggestion that perhaps we'd want to at least audit that course and take a look at whether or not it could be a year-long course. Yeah, duly noted.
Where does the new civics requirement fall in here?
So the new civics requirement will fall in our existing U.S. government course. We're going to have to take a look and do a crosswalk between the requirements and the the course as it exists currently. Now, we're waiting to see. The legislation as passed and signed by the governor requires that starting next school year, every student we graduate has to have had that civics requirement. We understand that in the upcoming veto session that bill will be amended so that it wouldn't go into effect until like the class of 18 or 19 or something. Correct. So we're waiting for a little bit more information from the legislature on that. So in terms of feedback from the various stakeholder groups, we talked to Collaboration Council, we talked with staff, we surveyed staff, we talked with families, we did the town hall meetings, and at its most basic level, we did not hear significant rationale or significant argument for making major changes to our graduation requirements. The feedback overwhelmingly indicated that families would prefer as much flexibility as possible, but that, as currently written, we weren't doing a disservice to students by requiring the 26 credits in the different areas that we require right now. So accordingly, we're recommending a number of minor changes, and I'll go through each of them individually. This is not a major overhaul, however, of our grad requirements. So the first is the consumer ed requirement. So the State Board of Education requires, and you can see it in real small language there at the bottom, that a number of topics related to consumer education be a part of a course that every high school student takes. For many years, we've gotten after that requirement as part of the global econ class. We're recommending some more flexibility for families and students to choose from one of 4 different courses with which to meet that requirement. So we'd like to ensure that the consumer ed topics are included in global econ, in AP macro econ, in intro to business, and in personal finance. So again, more flexibility for students because we do see and know how important consumer education and personal finance is. We'd like to see it tied to a business class and to a social studies class, and then leave it up to the student to choose which class they'd like to take.
I'll be honest with you. I think a personal finance class should be required by every kid in the schools. Every kid in the high school. With all of the loans that they have to take out in college anymore and all of the compounding rates and things like that, how to balance a checkbook, things like that,
How about just how not to get in trouble when the credit card offers start coming in your freshman year?
Right.
How about maybe we should just sew that on a T-shirt or something for them when they graduate. Say no, tear them up.
Just say no.
Along those lines, I think I passed on at one time one program, and I think there's others. And the one I'm thinking of is a CARE program that's put on by bankruptcy judges and bankruptcy attorneys that come out to the school. It's free of charge to the school. And they have exactly that type of a program, because much like how when we have a disciplinary issue in front of us and we say, we hear, well, I didn't know. Bankruptcy judges get tired of hearing people in situations that could have been avoided. So they have a program that comes out to high schools, and I think they do middle school as well, to try and help with that personal finance education. So, and I'm using that only by way of example to say, yeah, I concur, but maybe it's not part of, within the curriculum, an additional class for the students to take as much as an opportunity for them to have a program, an option.
Yeah. Well, and you know, one of the nice things about the timing here is that if we're not looking for this new policy, new graduation requirements to go into effect until next school year, beginning with the people who will be freshmen next school year, it'll be 5 full years before they graduate. It gives us ample time to pull curriculum teams together, to really dig into the curricula for each of those courses to ensure a couple of things. One, that the basic state requirements are being met, but then two, to ensure that the desire of this Board of Education and our stakeholders, you know, that to better educate our students in terms of personal finance, that we can ensure that that's written in as well. It also gives us ample time to take a look at Mr. Stevens' suggestion to whether or not it should be a year-long course. We have the ability over, you know, the next year, year and a half to make those modifications and still be ready in time for the kids who would be taking these courses as sophomores or juniors or as seniors.
I think it's surprising how many areas of higher education beyond high school people are not prepared for that simple stuff.
Yeah.
Those of you who know my background is in healthcare, I used to recruit doctors, and they had not a clue what business was about. They knew medicine, but they didn't know business. And I actually ended up teaching a class at the U of I in Rockford in medical school on how to set up a business of medicine. And I had people flocking to it. There was nothing like that. Now it's a required course.
Wow.
But kind of like the checkbook story, kids are not prepared. And I think by doing the other things we're doing, like with the industrial program and the tech program and that type of thing, I think we're moving in the right direction with those things. But maybe we need to put a little bit more emphasis on some of the nuts and bolts of finance too.
Mr. Fiorentino?
I was just going to add, we talked about the parent or community engagement part of that, and at the last national meeting, they had a couple workshops regarding this very topic, and they included those in the yearly offering. And it was a group. It was either, to Mrs. Miller's point, or financial advisors, but there were a group of people offering this to parents and students. So outside of the core curriculum, but it could be looked at through our engagement offering and make it part of that, curriculum.
Yeah.
And I think we can put together a very strong program and encourage both students and parents to join on that.
That's excellent. So recently, under Mr. Hyde's leadership, we've been having lots of conversation about how better to engage with our families and better provide resources and opportunities for them to view schools as more than just a place for their kids to go every day for 6 hours, but to engage in additional services. And what you're describing makes a ton of sense and is very in alignment with some of the conversation we've been having. Okay. So that's recommendation 1 of 5. Recommendation 2 regards physical education, health, and driver's education. So there's really 2 parts here. The first part is really a technical change that we don't imagine will result in a changing situation for many students, but it does provide a bit of added flexibility. So we require 3.5 credits of PE and 1.5 credit of health. So essentially, if you're here in high school for 4 years, you take health 1 semester and PE the rest of the semesters. We do, however, have a number of students who graduate early at the end of their junior year, or in some cases midway through their senior year. And currently, because the graduation requirement reads 3.5 credits of PE, we force those kids to double up on PE in order to graduate early. And so a minor technical change, if we just change the way we word it to say that you would be required to take a PE course for every semester that you're in attendance at the high school, I think then it obligates us to still provide the same amount of PE for students who graduate on a normal timeline in 4 years. No change for those students. But for the few students who do graduate early, it gives them a little more freedom and flexibility. And because we know the benefits of PE and health and exercise, it would allow us to require like 50-year seniors to take a PE class while they're still here. So that's the basis or the justification for the proposal. The second part of the proposal in this area is to eliminate driver education as a requirement for graduation. And again, we imagine that there's going to be very little impact to the school or to kids. 16-year-olds, they want to learn how to drive. We don't think that if we remove this as a grad requirement, that fewer 16-year-olds will want to drive. What it does is in those few situations where we have a kid who moves from out of state and comes to our school system and already has a driver's license, we're not going to make them go back through the course. We've had a number of students who move from other countries that have already gone through driver education. We wouldn't make them go through that course again.
Or you have those 18-year-olds who haven't taken driver's ed, aren't going to be able to get their licenses for whatever reason, and take it just because it's a requirement.
Right.
How do both of those changes relate with state requirements?
State requirements. So the PE change doesn't impact at all our ability to meet the state requirement. The requirement is daily PE. So as long as you're a student, you'd be required to be in either PE or health, so no change.
So the state doesn't say there's 4 years or
They do not.
4 credits?
Correct, yep. And school systems look at PE in a variety of different ways. There are school systems that don't give any credit for it. I mean, Mr. Hyde?
There are a number of school systems as well and other schools that do not require 4 years of PE. And we are currently investigating how some of those districts are getting around and circumventing that requirement. I'll give you a great example. Mast is one. Mast only requires 2 years. So there are obviously ways for us, and I think the way they've approached it is by placing an emphasis on core academics and allowing waivers. Our intention is not to, and again, I think that Mr. Parisi does a fabulous job of advocating for physical education and the needs and the fact that it creates lifelong health opportunities for our students. So there's no impact, but we need to review how some others are getting around or circumventing that requirement, because that seems to be, especially junior and senior year, it continues to be a topic of concern amongst our stakeholders. So we will continue to investigate that further. Some people are more free at disclosing how they're doing it, and others are a little more guarded in how they answer that because it is a requirement under the law.
Mr. Fiorentino?
So at the Dundee Crown, what do we call those? Retreat?
Town hall?
Thank you, Town Hall. This was probably the topic most discussed.
Right.
And there was some great feedback, I think, and Mr. Parisi did do a good job. I think the one thing here is to ascertain, are some of these schools doing a group waiver? I think we've chosen, at least historically, we do provide waivers. There are some waivers for various things like sports and others, but we don't do it as a whole system or a whole school or a whole class, or is that correct?
That's correct. We explicitly abide by the existing state statute requirements.
So that would be, our challenge if we really want to challenge this.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There are ways that other schools have addressed this, and so it's well worth our time and energy to look into those systems.
And just to be very transparent, the statute currently reads that if a student requires an additional academic course in order to graduate on time, that you may waive the PE option. So when I say we abide by the current statute, the only waivers we currently provide students and families are those that are explicitly outlined in the statute. I think that other districts are using that academic component as a means to waive that option in junior and senior year. But again, I would like to do more further. I would like staff and myself to follow up and provide additional information as to that. And that could be a recommendation in the future.
Mr. Alessio?
Just as an anecdote, I did have an official for one district tell me they provided 10 minutes of stretching during split between 2 periods, and that covered it for them because that was physical activity.
There are other states that require a specified minimum number of minutes for physical education each day, And there are schools that count transitioning to and from classes, the 5-minute transition, as part of the minutes towards their day. We do not do that here, thank goodness, but I do know other places that do that.
So, and I do know that the private high schools don't have to or do get away with other options. And I think you just explained to me how, from a personal experience, how I managed to not have to have all those years of PE.
Fitbits, just give everybody a Fitbit, 10,000
Yeah, it was-
steps and you're out of here.
Probably because I needed those academic classes to graduate. So.
I'm glad Mr. Parisi's not here this evening.
His ears are ringing, though, I'll tell you.
One other question on the driver's ed. Is there a difference between behind the wheel and classroom?
There is, yeah. So there's a couple of things that school code requires. It requires that we offer both the classroom and the behind the wheel portion. The behind the wheel is very specific in terms of the number of hours that they have to have to drive. I don't remember the number off the top of my head.
I think it's 6.5 or 6 3/4.
It's something like that, right? Yeah, so the actual behind the wheel time. And then we have flexibility in terms of how to run that before school, during the day, after school, over the summer. The classroom portion, now the school code requires that if you offer driver ed, you have to offer driver ed, you can have it meet for as little as 30 hours of contact time. So that equates to about a 9-week course. We run driver ed as an 18-week course, a full semester long course, but we don't necessarily need to. So one of the benefits in my mind of eliminating driver ed as a grad requirement is that we're going to continue to offer it, but now potentially we can look at other more flexible ways to offer that 30 hours of classroom instruction. So maybe you tie it to another class or a study hall or a PE class where you pull groups of kids out for instruction and then put them back in. It'll give us more flexibility, but as long as the board's requirement is a half of a credit of driver ed to graduate, then we don't have the flexibility to look at other ways to get after it. Okay. Number 3, so the elective strand. So this is another topic that has engendered a lot of conversation. As I mentioned earlier, to my understanding, the strand requirements have been around as one way to ensure that students get a well-rounded education. We are not recommending that we eliminate the strand requirements. However, we are recommending that a policy and a form be developed to provide some additional flexibility around the strand credits. So for example, and I included it in the board packet, if we had a policy and a form that said students must take 2 of the 3 strand credits, and they could replace one strand area for another strand area based on their post-secondary plans, then we'd be in favor of that. So if a student knows that they're going to apply to a music conservatory to study music after high school graduation, and if they had worked on their 4-year plan with their parent and their counselor, and they filled out the form in their junior year and said, I'd like permission to not take a Strand 3 course, so not take a business course or an industrial ed course because I need to take additional music courses in Strand 1, that would be a reason why we would approve the replacement of one strand for another. Likewise, you may have a student who says, I am going to, I'm pre-med, and I want to go to college to do pre-med, and then I want to go to medical school. Our anatomy and physiology and zoology and AP biology, those are all science credits. The student may write a request saying, I'd like to be exempted from a Strand 3 or Strand 1 requirement in order to take more science classes in Strand 2. Again, if it's tied to a post-secondary plan, we're in favor of exploring that added flexibility.
While you're on this, how does that relate to how we have our high schools, Dundee Crown being the entrepreneur program, and Hampshire and Jacobs, each of those specializing in that? How does that play into the ability to do that?
Sure. So we'll take Hampshire High School for a moment. Look at their advanced manufacturing program. There are students who are going to come in as freshmen and say, I know this is a career path for me. Or perhaps they're not so sure, but their parents are saying, this is a career path for you. They may, in their freshman year, really double up on industrial arts classes, and they may take welding, and they may take woods, and they'll take our manufacturing course. Their sophomore year, they're taking all the core courses. They're taking advanced levels of manufacturing and woods and welding. And by their junior year, they're really confident that this is a career path for them. They may not be going to college. They may be going to trade school. And so they wouldn't necessarily need a world language or an art class or a music class. So they would fill out the form and say, I'd like to replace that strand 1 requirement with an additional strand 3 in the industrial area. So that gives those students the flexibility to really hone in on the courses that they want to take. This won't really come into play with every student. It probably won't come into play with most students because we do have enough room in our schedules in a 9-period day that students can take the gamut of industrial arts classes and still fit an art class into their schedule. But we do want the flexibility for those students who have a clear college or career path to take advantage of that. Does that make sense?
One question I saw in the draft language, it seemed very restrictive. Could that be changed to be the way you described it?
Yes.
Because here it says courses to enroll in specific classes which are required for admission to an institution of post-secondary learning. If you're junior, you might not know which college you're going to,
Right.
or which one you're going to be finally admitted to. So I think if it's described more in the way you presented it, then it fits their plans.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was a first draft, a first attempt to kind of get on paper the gist or the idea. We were looking forward to feedback from the board, and then we can take and wordsmith absolutely and bring you back something. Yep.
Ms.
With all due respect, Dr. Churchill,
Yes, ma'am.
I do have to correct you on one thing, that in a 9-period day, having a freshman and a junior now, trying to fit everything does become a challenge when certain classes are only offered at certain times.
Yeah.
And I love the idea. I'm really curious more in practice because I could picture kids who think they're going to be on Glee or the next Glee star loading up on music classes, thinking they're going to be able to write this proposal. I think you've kind of said in their junior year to avoid those strands, and reality could bite quickly and
Yeah.
things could change. So I'm so supportive of flexibility. I just think that I'd like to see some, I don't know, just some.
There's no way to gauge what you're getting at. So your concern is that will it shift staffing and needs for available courses throughout a child's beginning in middle school? We are going to have to be more prescriptive in forcing choice. Students, what this does is allows a student early on to identify a particular area of interest and pursue those through course offerings. As the school, once students submit their course interests and they rank their courses as far as priority, the school then can use that information to create a master schedule that would provide additional sections. And that's, again, why we do budget conference and why we also review their allocation models to ensure that they have the appropriate staffing in place. But there will always be, regardless of the type of schedule we operate in, there will always be issues of forced choice because they simply have to make a commitment and select to go in a certain pathway. And unfortunately, we do not have the ability, we don't have the space, we don't have the fiscal means to provide every single course, every period of every day for every student.
And I apologize if I made it sound like I expected that. What I was speaking to, there will still be challenges, and then my concern, so it's kind of a dual purpose statement that I made, and I apologize for being unclear. My concern are those kids who might make some choices early on that then they have to course correct, and I'm thinking like that kid who just thinks they're going to go to Broadway and they're going to load up heavy on music, and they could have everybody saying, listen, it's going to be hard. So I just want, I'll just not speak any longer about it. I apologize. I'm supportive of it. I could see some.
Think to your point, though, we're not going to eliminate the ability, there's one strand, which is one credit, that they could then not have to do. So they can still have to do 1 credit in each of the other 2 strands, and maybe they're going to have more credits in one particular one. So they are still getting a little bit of roundedness. They're just going to be 1 credit, 1 strand short.
Yeah, and the reality is, so the number of parents that contact my office or contact the superintendent's office on an annual basis is very small, right? But each year there are a handful of students that say for reasons X, Y, and Z, because of my career path or college path, I'd really like to be exempted from the strand requirement. And we've always said, no, our board has a policy and a graduation requirement, and we're going to enforce that. This just gives us some additional flexibility. I don't anticipate that it's going to result in a huge shift, and any shift that does occur, we would like to believe it's occurring in the best interest of students and their long-term plans.
You know, I think it helps address the fact that when these originally were created, there were hardly any AP classes. The offerings have exploded in the past 4 years, but with double period AP Calc, AP Science, you know, even senior year, you might get caught where you can't fit in the 3rd strand just because you barely have any periods left for English and PE.
Right. And I apologize. I didn't mean to minimize the challenges in scheduling. I recognize that it's hard to fit everything in. My point was that it's possible if you are focused on doing that. But you're right.
Yeah, I think parents don't contact you about it because they contact me first. I hear about more than a handful of them.
Okay.
But usually there's a way to fit it if you plan ahead.
Right. Excellent. All right. We're almost there. So the core areas. This is the recommendation is no recommendation. We are not recommending a change to English, math, or science. So 4 years are currently required by the state board, and 4 years are required by our board. So all students take 4 years of English. In terms of math, 3 years are required by the state, 3 years are required by our board. And when we dug a little deeper, we found that nearly 70% of our seniors are taking a math class. That increased in the last couple of years as a result of the new 4th-year math course. And some additional offerings in math. So we're pleased to see that more than 2/3 of our seniors are in math. Likewise, in the area of science, while only 2 years are required, which is the state minimum requirement, we've found 85%, roughly on any given year, 85% of our juniors are in science. And just about 2/3 of our seniors are in a 4th year of science. So we don't see a problem in terms of students not taking science because the requirement is only for 2 years, if that makes sense.
No, I do see a problem with students not taking the 3rd-year science, and most of them do it, but a few are left out. That just tells me that there wouldn't be that much of a change in staffing or space required if we required the last 15% to also take science as a junior.
Right.
I think we need to be very careful in mandating a course that arguably our entire discussion leading up to this one has been about providing additional flexibility. And as a science teacher, it bothers me we only require 2 years of science, but the reality is students who want to pursue that pathway as a potential career are exposed and they're self-selecting those options. It would be disingenuous for us to have conversations about providing additional flexibility with strands and other content areas and then turn around and prescribe a 3rd year of science. And quite honestly, then that opens the door to additional conversations about requirements for foreign language and other content areas that we do not address in any way.
That's actually my next topic, because I know many states do require foreign language, and most college applications have that as a 5th core area. So I was wondering, if the board did decide to add a foreign language requirement, how many years do you think that would take to implement?
It depends on where the foreign languages are offered, and there's a lot of conversation around what foreign languages we would offer. Currently, we do offer languages that are based more on interest and not necessarily where industry would take students. And availability of certified staff. One of the things we'll be talking about throughout the year, and we already have 4 town hall meetings scheduled beginning in September and October to have conversations with parents about the middle school acceleration since our waiver was submitted and will be accepted by ISB. We have the ability to provide accelerated course offerings at middle school. If we were going to pursue high school requirements for foreign language, I think that's probably a conversation best delayed for 16, 17, so that we could get those courses implemented at the middle school level to provide additional flexibility in the high school schedule. It's so packed tight right now, there's very little flexibility. However, if we offered, for example, Spanish 1 and Spanish 2 in 7th and 8th grade that were high school credit courses, students could achieve those graduation requirements earlier. So I think there's more. I would encourage the board to be open to more dialogue throughout this year in preparation for that. We could always revisit the graduation requirements inclusive of foreign language. That would also benefit our students to make them more competitive in their college applications and scholarships, because the state of Illinois now has a seal of biliteracy that students can earn and attach to their high school diploma. As such, it makes more sense to begin foreign language instruction in the middle grades and be able to, again, provide students not only with high school credits for courses they're taking for acceleration options, but also to address those issues if the board would like to pursue that option.
Yes, that's why it's leading to, I know I'd have to start to middle school. That's why I know it'd be a number of years beyond the scope of this change we're discussing tonight.
I think aggressively we could do it in one. I do apologize, Ms. Berger.
And I think it would help with competitiveness for college, or actually many jobs, military, and there's other pay raises with foreign language capabilities, because students from other states are required to take foreign language. And so if you're competing nationally, then you're at disadvantage by being from Illinois.
I think I would like to look at the numbers of how many kids take foreign languages, because to make something like that a requirement when we have career technical education where they're not going to need those skills, every student that I know that needs it for college takes it. So I would like to look at the numbers and find out, well, who takes it anyway? Everyone knows that whether or not they're going to need that for college. And I don't know that we have. I mean, we're already pretty much at the top level at what we require for graduation requirements, and for us to add to that takes away a lot of flexibility from some of the kids that just don't want to take it, or that if they already have it, then I guess it'd be okay.
I understand need for flexibility. I think what concerns me is the students who are leaving a period or 2 periods early as a junior or senior, when
But how many of the kids going to college don't have foreign language? Because all of the kids that I've ever known going to college have all had them.
I think we're seeing a national trend beyond college for biliteracy.
Yes.
So competitiveness, I think Dave said it, is whether you look at the armed forces or technical, there is a lot of rewards in there for someone that's, and we're not setting our young people up for that at this point. With respect to when we look at this, I would like to see you broaden who we're looking at. I'd like to look at the top 100, 200 high school systems across the country to see what the trends are. Because I think what you'll find is the trends are that they are requiring foreign languages. When I look at especially East Coast schools, I see more of that as a trend. Now, in Illinois and I think the 4 districts that you looked at, but I want to look beyond Huntley and Crystal Lake when it comes to this. This, to me, is competitiveness in Illinois and throughout our nation and beyond that. So, and it's a big project, but if we're going to bite into this, let's do it the right way.
Kim?
I think that kids who are on certain tracks include foreign language. And I think by making it a requirement, it could be to the detriment of those students who are not on certain tracks. Now, I think encouraging it, I think offering it in enough volume that we have enough teachers to cover the kids who want to take it is a great idea. But I think, and I understand about, but we could set ourselves up for complete failure by having 50% of our students just fail miserably at language, because some people, I'm one of them, just can't pick up. I barely get English. I can't pick up another language. And I think that we could really put ourselves in a trick bag by making it a requirement instead of making it as accessible as possible to every student who wants it, not making it a have to for every student, period.
It might be interesting to have some of that data come back, just so that we can see. A concern would be to make sure that we don't eliminate the ability to take a foreign language because a student is not going on to college. To your point, Mr. Fiorentino, it isn't just college-bound students interested in foreign language. We need to make sure that those that are in a career path understand that there may be some ability, competitive advantage to having not only their manufacturing experience, but also a bilingual experience. I agree that the way this is set up right now and where we are and what it would take to include foreign language, we don't have that data right now to be able to say yes or no, but to pull data together to say, you know, we're dealing with, you know, class of what, 2020?
Right.
You know, to think a little bit beyond 2020, but I mean, that's just amazing to me that we're thinking 2020. And by that time, those students that are graduating in 2020, a lot of them will need to be bilingual just to be competitive in getting a part-time job in our area. You know, go through McDonald's, go through, you know.
And you see that trend. We spent some of the summer traveling in Europe, and as did a few of our friends, and this was that was a huge factor. 6th and 7th grade, the amount of students that are bilingual or trilingual in Europe is huge, and clearly the trend to make them more globally competitive. And it wasn't just professionals, and it wasn't just college-bound students. It was the trade students that they were more than encouraging it to, you know. And let's face it, we look at it, but we have to think of it as a 6th or 7th grader, right? I mean, at that age, there's. Well, that's another topic for another time.
And how many weeks, months?
Right. My point is also sometimes when you think of this, we have to think of it as younger people, not as adults, because what we can comprehend as a respect to a foreign language is very different than what a young person can, and that's why they're moving in the direction of younger when it comes to foreign languages.
There's so much to be considered with foreign language. I mean, how many years? What language? Should it be offered in high school? Should we start with elementary? It's not the same as dealing with science, because those of us who just have a total aversion to science are pretty pleased that we only had to have 2 years of it.
It speaks to the caliber of your instructor, not the course.
Yeah, well, but my instructor is now in the financial world and gave up
Oh, mine's dead.
science teaching science.
So he or she was old when you had
Yes.
So, anyhow, if maybe we can keep the topic of foreign language sort of running through as we're looking to
And-
develop what.
And again, that's why I prefaced it this evening by saying that is a topic as we look at middle school acceleration options now that the governor has signed that flexibility into effect, that would be something that takes additional time for us to research, analyze, ensure the staffing, curriculum. There's a lot of things, certifications, but we just can't keep adding requirements at the high school level for a number of reasons. And we'll discuss that throughout the year with the board and through town hall meetings as well.
I think we'll go on to recommendation number 5, so
Sure thing, and-
Dr. Churchill can finish.
No worries. And just so you know, I'm not texting my friends. I'm taking notes on all the things that I need to look at. So we'll certainly get you the information you're asking for. So the final recommendation just deals with other policies. So while these are not technically graduation requirements, we wanted to talk through with the board some of the changes that we're making in other areas. So the first has to do with sophomore ASP. For those of you who don't recall, the academic support period, or ASP, is sometimes known as a guided study hall. Sometimes it's known as a waste of time, depending on who you ask. We'd like to, we've listened to folks, we've listened to students and families and even board members who have said that, look, if a student is doing well And we're at this point defining well as a B average or a 3.0 GPA on an unweighted scale cumulatively over their freshman year. We'd give them the opportunity to take an additional class in lieu of that sophomore ASP. We continue to maintain that for struggling students, their sophomore year, they need some additional time in the day for added support. We're going to work to really fine-tune that additional support via tutoring, via other mechanisms, but we agree with what many folks have said, which is, if I'm doing okay and I want to take another class, why won't you let me take another class? So our recommendation is that, in fact, moving forward, starting next year, if you've got a 3.0 GPA at the end of your freshman year, you wouldn't have to take that sophomore ASP, although you could if you wanted to.
That's not a 2020, that's a next year.
This is a next year. That's the recommendation, right?
I like this option.
Okay.
I like keeping it for freshmen, though, because it's a big change. And I think that maybe freshman year, that it is important to get them off and started on the right foot. But I agree with the sophomore, if they're doing well and they feel that they want to take an elective.
Yeah. So then the second part of this recommendation has to do junior and senior year. We give students the opportunity to have a late arrival or an early dismissal, and we've allowed any student to take advantage of that. Just as we feel that students who aren't doing well need some additional support their freshman and sophomore year, well, junior and senior year they do too. So anyone who has less than a 2.5 GPA, so, in the mid-Cs, cumulatively, we're not going to give them the ability to have a late arrival or early dismissal because we want them to stay in school and take some additional classes. Any student, junior or senior year, who fails a class, they may have a 3.5 cumulative GPA, but they fail something. Likewise, we're going to say, we're going to take away your ability to have a late arrival or early dismissal.
If I could ask, there's a little shady area between that 3.0 for the sophomores and then the 2.49 for, the junior seniors. I guess just out of curiosity, like, why is that the litmus? Why isn't it a 3.0? Why isn't it 2.75? What?
Sure, right.
Where did that come from?
So we,
It seems a little low. That's from
yeah, so we discussed at the High School Collaboration Council over the course of the year this recommendation, and we, as a team, pulled the numbers of students that would be impacted, and we looked at it at 3.5, at 3, at 2.5, at 2, and I can't tell you the numbers off the top of my head, but 2.5 was kind of a sweet spot in terms of numbers of students impacted. It's somewhere around half or so of our juniors and seniors fell below the 2.5, right? Of the students who were taking advantage of late start and early arrival, not the overall population. No. And in fact, many of the highest achieving students were not taking advantage of late start because they were taking as many academic classes as they could for college.
And it's already inclusive of students who have an F, so those students are automatically ineligible.
Right.
So
Right.
the 2.5, it's a capacity issue and a number of other things that we need to review.
Yep.
you.
You're welcome. So those, I believe, are the recommendations. So we will come back. We'll see you all right here in a couple weeks and ask for a formal approval of these recommendations.
Churchill, if you'll do me a favor and just click ahead 2 slides. My presentation is only 1 slide as compared to your 52.
Build up for this.
You want some popsicle
So if you'll do me a
sticks?
favor. So, board members, I did apprise you of this change or proposed change through an email outlining the fact that these recommendations were provided by both our external counsel, Frantic, and were verified also through the Illinois Department of Health and by the CDC. Currently, our schools, especially the elementary grades, as you know, spend an inordinate amount of time screening the entire school for head lice repeatedly throughout the year. And quite honestly, that is a practice that almost all districts have moved away from. And our external counsel was actually, and internal counsel were both surprised it was a practice we currently still used. Ms. Schmidt came forward to me, Sherry, our district nurse, came forward and shared with me the concerns expressed by our nurses that we become more compliant with requirements. So really simply stated, while it's in the admin policies, I think it's in an effort to be completely transparent with the school board. We'll begin messaging this to parents. We will no longer conduct school-wide screenings. That's an inordinate amount of time and effort put on our nurses that have other duties and responsibilities they'd be better served at doing. And what we would do is we would still provide screenings when a student is if there's a concern about a particular student and based on parental feedback. We would still, as a requirement, provide a letter to parents if we have identified a confirmed case within the classroom. And that letter, as I provided you with all the documents as it speaks to this issue, outlines not only the steps but the requirements for parents before the child returns to school. So I think again, commendations to staff on doing their due diligence and finding ways to eliminate requirements and provide greater autonomy and flexibility to our existing school nurses who do a tremendous job. As a testament, as you recall, board members, I sent us an update last week regarding the opening of schools with an average daily attendance rate of 98%. That's significantly higher. And also the number of students who came to school without their shots, their physicals, those things were significantly reduced, and in some cases were eliminated completely. So that is all on their efforts, and so moving forward, I will work with the board and to message within the community that we will abide by our exclusionary practice for 16-17. It's exciting to know that we're getting that type of response. But that's all this does, is provide us with the ability to address what's considered to be current practice and provide more flexibility for our school nurses.
Mrs. Burley?
Well, as a mom who had to help the nurse way back in the day at Newbert have to do the comb checks, wish this had happened sooner. But my only concern and the question that I have is, how are you going to screen those children? I mean, is there, I assume that there's certain, if a kid is scratching his head a lot.
Correct. There are behaviors or other indicators that classroom teachers are aware of.
Will you need permission from a parent to check them?
We do. We would contact the parent and receive permission. If the parent refuses to provide us permission to check, we would send home the guidelines for them, and essentially we could deny access if needed. So,
Yeah, I didn't see the parental consent, sorry.
correct.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. Hyde?
No, ma'am. Seeing no questions from the board, that concludes the superintendent's report for this evening.
Okay.
Very good topics this evening, though.
Moving on.
Okay.
We have no public participation. Item 6, consent items. Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Yep. Fiorentino.
Fiorentino,
Aye.
Burley. Alessio, aye. Garcia.
Yes.
Lopez.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Stevens.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, moving on. Item 7.1, approval of construction management service request for qualifications renewal. Motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Most of these probably won't because we covered all of these at our last meeting. Roll call, please.
Stevens.
Aye.
Lopez.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Alessio, aye. Fiorentino.
Aye.
Burley.
Aye.
Garcia. Motion passes 7-0.
7.2, approval of SmartNet contract renewal. Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Sorry, was that a second down there?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Roll call, please.
Lopez.
Aye.
Burley.
Aye.
Fiorentino.
Aye.
Stevens.
Aye.
Alessio, aye. Garcia.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Item 7.3, approval of nurse and athletic training supplies bid.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Alessio?
Stevens.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Alessio, aye. Lopez.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Fiorentino.
Aye.
Burley.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
7.4, approval of custodial equipment bid.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Alessio?
Stevens.
Aye.
Alessio, aye. Burley.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Lopez.
Aye.
Fiorentino.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
7.5, approval of copier paper contract pricing bids.
So
Motion.
move.
Second.
Any discussion?
It's a lot
Okay.
of paper.
Mr. Alessio?
Stevens.
Aye.
Alessio, aye. Miller.
Aye.
Fiorentino.
Aye.
Lopez.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Burley.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Item 7.6, approval of weed control and pesticide bid.
So
So
moved.
move. Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Alessio?
Alessio, aye. Stevens.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Burley.
Aye.
Fiorentino.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Lopez.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, moving on. Board discussion, committee reports. Anything on construction and facilities?
No.
Okay, finance?
No.
Oh, okay. Recognition reception, I don't know what that is.
I didn't either. Mr. Hyde?
I'm sorry.
Recognition reception?
Looking for confirmation. I apologize, Mr. Stevens. I hate to put you on the spot, but I thought we had some photos queued for you.
You do, but I was waiting for board discussion.
Yes, sir. I apologize.
That's
I
all right.
misunderstood. That's why I was turning to staff to say, okay,
No,
wait a second, did we
I definitely do
we
want to do
opt
that,
not
but-
to do it? Okay. I apologize, Madam President. What was the?
The recognition reception? What is that? Okay, so moving on. Any other board?
8.2.1.
Two.
It's on the agenda.
Is that the Kishwaukee meeting at HHS?
Oh, this was a change to our entry process. So as you saw tonight, when we had students come in and say the pledge, it's a very convoluted process to come down, shake their hands, those types of things. So what we proposed is that during the first closed session of the evening, the last 10 minutes, we will exit, if the board approves, we would exit closed. That gives the board time to arrive, go through the packets, address any issues, set the stage for the second closed session as needed. For the last 10 minutes, we would step out into the cafeteria area, and we would take pictures ahead of the meeting so that parents could get different types of photos with board members. Many of you at times know students. You have relationships with students that your children have grown up with or that you know through other social activities. So we would like to provide an opportunity to provide them with an affirmation outside of the board meeting as well, take photos for our own district websites, school websites, and we would provide accolades there and then not have to necessarily do the handshakes and all the things that take up a considerable amount of time. And again, the way the boardroom is designed and the length of the desks, it's a process that we go through to shake hands, and we're always happy the high schoolers are here because they are much taller and they can reach across to reach many of us. So the effort is that we do recognition slightly differently, and that we would, again, during the meeting, the board would provide recognition. Yet again, they would come up, receive their awards, but not necessarily have to have each individual student shake hands. For example, when we have large numbers of students for athletic recognitions, ACT recognition, those types of things, they would still get that individualized attention and photos available outside of the board meeting room itself.
Okay, yeah, this was not our design, and our design would have accommodated the ability to do that. Just want to make sure that that goes on record to say
It
that.
was an I told you so for somebody, I'm not sure.
So,
Without pointing any fingers as to the construction of the dais, because I have no problem with it, how realistic is a 10-minute reception when we know how much time it takes in here? I just want to set I'm kind of a clock watcher, so, when we're in our clothes and we're getting close to that 6:30, I start like, okay, we got to make sure we're out there on time. We're going to have public here, hopefully more as time goes on. I just want to make sure that we're realistic with the 10 minutes.
I think the board would gauge the amount of time needed based on the number of students you would be recognizing.
and we always have the option then to have the second closed session.
That is
for
correct.
time.
Are we having students also offer a pledge on work sessions or only on business meetings?
All school board meetings, we have students conducting the pledge, and they're all scheduled for the year.
Good.
Receptions, Ms.
Let's give it a try.
Yeah. Any other board
I
discussion?
do have a small update after. Jody?
Go ahead.
I was just going to give a legislative update.
Go ahead.
Okay. I was in a meeting today with Congressman Hultgren. He's one of our congressmen here in the area, talking a little bit about finding out where ESEA is, which you may know as No Child Left Behind. In the past, because this has not, a lot of the changes that have happened in education have happened after the lapse, because it gives an executive fiat to our president and to his secretary of education. So a lot of people are really pushing to try to get this ESEA reauthorization, and I'm happy to report that there has been some movement on it. The House passed H.R. 5, which they call the Student Success Act. So that passed, and then the Senate also passed their version, which is Senate Bill 1177, Every Child Achieves Act. So now what happens is there's going to be a committee from both the House and the Senate that will convene in committee. Hopefully won't take another couple of years, but they're hopeful that that they'll be able to come together and come together with some sort of a combined effort. Couple of different issues that we have with it concerning our IDEA funds and Title I funds. Congressman Hultgren is not on any of these committees, so he really was of little help. We did speak with him about the OCR reports, which is our Office of Civil Rights, because it is a report that costs our district tens upon tens of hours. I don't know how many hours it takes for this report, and it pretty much just sits in a file. So it's a very costly report. And the congressman did acknowledge that he knows about that. From what I can see from the Student Success Act and Every Child Achieve Acts, I don't know what the final will be, but it gives a lot of local control back to the school districts. It may not be the panacea of everything that we'd like to see, but it's a really good start, and we can tweak it from there and then get back some of the local control that we have lost. Because just to give you an idea of a couple of the amendments, Amendment number 3 from 1 is allow parents to opt their student out of testing required under H.R. 5 and exempt schools from including students that have opted out. So that would not penalize our schools if a parent takes their child out. Now, this is not in the final because the final report, the other is that a state may withdraw from the Common Core state standards without any penalty. So don't know if those will stay in the final version or not, but they're making movement on it. So hopefully within the next year or so, we'll have something, and that'll be big. That's all I got.
Any other board members? Mr. Stevens.
Could we have a drum roll here, please? I told you last time that I had some pictures. I just forgot to send them on to have them loaded. I have them loaded now from my visit to Parkview. Parkview was a very sterile-looking building. If you look at them as they're flying by. But now we've had people come in and dress it up a little bit. If you look at the Panther, it looks strikingly familiar if you ever go out to Hampshire High School. This is the principal, Jorge Amoldovar, looking very happy that the school looks spiffy. And I think it changed the whole, you can flip through those.
Yes, sir.
It's okay. This particular one I wanted to show you because there was a large chunk of concrete out of the corner of the building. And when I visited it, I brought this to Chuck's attention, who had just recently, I think, became aware of it. And it's been fixed and looks great. And I just wanted to follow up and say that when you do go to these schools and you do bring forward things like that, they do get addressed. And so as we all have our assignments, you should not just be looking only at academics, but also at the school itself. And none of these things that I'm showing you here in the pictures were there before. It was just a very sterile environment, and the kids were thrilled. I've talked to Jorge after school started, and they were absolutely excited and thrilled when they saw these things on the wall. So thank you for taking care of that, Chuck and Fred. I really appreciate it. The kids appreciate it. And this particular wall, I'm sorry that I didn't know how to take the panoramic view, but that whole wall is full of storybook characters. It's got warriors and knights, and it's got Harry Potter and everything on that wall. It was very well done, just very, very well done. So thank you for indulging me, and you should all take a look at it if you get a chance to go over there.
Thank you. That's beautiful work.
It was beautiful.
Okay, I need a motion to go into closed.
I have one more quick if I could,
Okay.
before we adjourn. The IASB dinner that we have out at Hampshire, I need some direction. Who do I talk to? I mean, who are we am I working with you, Fred, or am I working with out at Hampshire directly? I mean, for,
I believe you and Mrs.
Susina.
Kopaz
right.
are on that committee together and would be coordinating with Mr. Hyde. And maybe what we'll do is I'll coordinate, because we have the whole open meetings issue, and so.
Right.
But I don't know if we're actually discussing business of the public body. If not, then we three can get together and give direction and work with Mr. Hyde. If there is an issue, then I'll talk with Mr. Hyde and he can work with you and Mrs. Kopaz.
Okay, I'm just eager to get started on that, because if we want to get student groups involved, they're going to need time to prepare.
Those things have already been addressed. The only group that has time within the calendar or the agenda in which they've provided would be the group from Hampshire. Dr. Bending was apprised of that. They're looking at bringing a choral group in. Student ambassadors will meet students as they enter the building. All the logistics, on my knowledge, have been addressed. I think we're still waiting on a map of the building. We provided several options to the organization as far as how they'd like to tour the building, because it's a very large facility. So we will restrict and provide them opportunity to see multiple areas, but try and keep them within a relatively small area of the building. Again, just because 3 floors, and it's a huge footprint, as you know. So we're not trying to say you can't go see anything. I think we'll provide tours to the fine and performing arts areas. We'll provide other tours that will go into the career and technical education areas, other tours that will go into computer labs and classrooms, so that every group can come back and kind of share what they saw. But to get everyone who attends into every one of those areas within 30 minutes is a virtual impossibility. So they did provide us with information and feedback based on a number of questions. They will have a dinner in one location of the building, and then they will do their actual presentation and meeting in the auditorium presentation area on the 2nd floor. They will bring and provide either a flash drive, or they will email us ahead of time with their presentation. Someone's going to arrive as early as 4:30 the day of the event to make sure that all the technology is working for the presentation. So I think we are really in a good spot moving forward, but I will continue to work with Ms. Miller, Ms. Kopaz, and Ms. Burley to make sure that we are well prepared for that event.
Anything else? Okay, need a motion to go.
So moved.
Closed session to discuss the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body, litigation, and negotiations.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Doesn't work though.
Oh, and there'll be no action to follow.
Thank you, Dr. Churchill, for putting up with. Yeah.